So, I'd like to talk about a couple of compositional ideas which hopefully you will find interesting and useful, and I'd like to talk also about the compositional process, my thought processes if you like, that I went through during the composition of this piece. Now it's a recent piece which was composed using Native Instruments' Komplete Kontrol system. It was done entirely in the box, and I used the Native Instruments S49 keyboard controller and their Maschine hardware. If you want to know why I pronounce it like that, please see the Cuba video. There's a card there, and there will be a link in the description. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that one of my favorite compositional techniques is to get a sound alike and see what that suggests. I'm sure a lot of people do that as well. So the starting point for this piece was the main riff. I wanted something with an ambient, chill out sort of vibe. So I experimented with a few sounds, put another layer on top of the basic riff, and then wondered what on earth I could do with it. Now I created this in the Maschine sequencer software, which is a pattern-based sequencer, and it encourages you to create music in patterns. So I set out a whole series of these riffs in a pattern. So I basically formed a backdrop to the piece. Now there are all sorts of music which can fall under the ambient umbrella. The ambient drone is a very popular technique. I prefer my ambient with some sort of change going on somewhere in the music. So I've done that a little bit with various layers on top of the basic riff. However, what I really wanted to do was to add something on top of that to give it more of a vibe. At this point I wasn't totally sure what sort of vibe I was after. So when I was looking for different sounds, I came across this sort of vocal whispering sound. Now I thought it was a very interesting sound. It's a whisper, but not as we know it, Jim. It doesn't seem to be in any particular language. It's not English, it's not Latin, it's just a whispery sound. And I thought it sounded quite creepy. A little bit snake-like, serpent-like, but it definitely had a creepy vibe to it. So I thought that was it. Absolutely, this is going to be an ambient, chill-out piece with a creepy vibe. So you'll hear these little vocal whispers throughout the piece. So as well as the whispers, I added other sounds and effects to give it what I take to be and hope to be a sort of creepy vibe. But you can let me know what you think. So as I was listening to this again, I had a thought, and that was, if I had not discovered these whispery sounds, what would the piece have turned out like? And I thought if I used whooshes and zaps and zings and blasts and so on, the piece could have quite a space opera feel to it. And then I thought if I used a celeste and a belltree and used slightly lighter vocal voices. At the beginning there's sort of a monk's chant which reinforces the basic riff, and I think under certain circumstances monk chants can be quite sinister. But if I'd used lighter voices, elven voices perhaps, something like that, then this piece could have had a fantasy vibe. So there are two sort of compositional ideas or suggestions that you might like to consider. Now these are things which you probably already know. They may be buried in your subconscious. It's the sort of thing you might do instinctively. But if it's out there in the fore, in your conscious mind, it's something which you're more likely to take notice of and perhaps act on if you think it's appropriate for whatever piece of music you're working on at the time. So the first is quite simply that the choice of sounds can have a very dramatic effect on the music. You knew that anyway. But if you're going for a particular vibe, then pay particular attention to the sort of sounds which you use. I think this piece demonstrates that quite well. But if you're struggling with a riff or a line, perhaps if you concentrated on finding a sound which you think fits the music and the vibe, first of all, and then see what sort of music line that sound suggests, that might be a good way to move forward with your composition. And the second point I think is particularly interesting because of the way a lot of modern music is produced. Because of the tools we use, particularly sequences which are pattern-based, we tend to think in terms of patterns. Now, I know virtually all music is pattern-based if you break it down into verses and choruses and middle eights and so on. But the modern tools sort of encourage us to create 2 and 4 bar patterns and stick them together. So the result is a very pattern-based piece of music. In the case of Whispers, this piece of music, it is very much pattern-based, with the riff repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. However, the point I want to make here is, even if you create a piece of music which is 2 bars or 4 bars repeated, 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 if you then look at it in a linear fashion, you can add pieces to it. I'm basically talking about ambient type music here, but you can add little pieces, little snippets, little sections in a linear fashion to get away from the, shall we say, rigidity of a pattern-based tune, which is something that I've tried to do here. So although it is essentially a pattern-based tune, I have looked at it in a linear fashion and added little sections here and here and here to break away from the rigidity of a pattern-based arrangement. So if you find that some of your music is essentially pattern-based, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. If it sounds good, it sounds good, however it's been arranged. But if you find that you are writing in patterns, then perhaps you could look at it as a linear sequence and add sections over the top to break it up a little bit. That is just an idea and a suggestion. So I hope you found that interesting. What the point, I hope you found it helpful and useful. Let me know if you did in the comments section. So here's Whispers. Creepy ambient. Does it hit the mark? Let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to know what you think. So if you did find this interesting, useful, hopefully helpful, and you did enjoy the music, then please consider subscribing, ring the bell, and hit the big thumb. And as always, I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. So for that, thank you very, very much indeed. Here's Whispers.